Welcome back. It's Adam again, and we are continuing with our video series ranking the top 15 favorite Agatha Christie detective novels and short story collections. So today we're up to number 8. We've got a little bit of a surprise for number 8 today. This is not one of Agatha Christie's more well-known popular detective novels. This is one that I don't often hear mentioned or talked about that often on BookTube, but I really like it. It is the standalone Death Comes as the End. So this is an Agatha Christie novel that she wrote during the peak of her powers. It was written in 1944. And again, as I've mentioned, when counting down the other books in this top 15 series, I have mentioned that I think Agatha Christie was at the peak of her writing abilities in the 30s and 40s. That's when she was writing her best material. And again, as we've already seen earlier in the countdown, I've already actually had some books that she wrote in the 1920s and in the 1950s. So her time as a exceptional writer was pretty long. So her writing career, if you don't know, started in 1920. And she wrote her last novel about 1973, 1974. So she had a very long writing career. But again, in my opinion, her best material was what she was writing in the 1930s and the 1940s, with a few notable exceptions, as this video series will show. So Death Comes as the End, not one of her more well-known or popular mystery novels, but one that I really, really like. Why do I like it? Well, again, the idea for me is that you have a family, and this is very much a family murder mystery. You have a family that comes together, and there is a cat among the pigeons, so to speak, to use one of the titles of one of her other detective novels. There is a cat among the pigeons. Somebody in the family is not very loving, and they want to get away with murder, and so they're selfish and they have motives for getting away with murder. And so I love those kind of stories where it's a family's gathered together, and you have to figure out who is the person in the family who wants to cause harm to the rest of the family. What is their motivation to do so, and why are they trying to bring the family down? And so I like the family dynamic. And this is a theme that she returns to more than once in her writing career, and so I tend to like those. Again, as I've mentioned in the other videos, if you have a lot of character development, if you make your characters interesting, which Agatha Christie does in a lot of her novels, including this one, and then you also have a clever murder mystery, then you've got the ingredients for a winner. Now, I will say this one, the reason that I like this one has more to do with, I would say, the unique setting, the unique aspects of this book, which I'll get to in just a moment. The character development in this one is really quite well done. I believe the murder mystery is not as good as maybe like in ABC Murders. ABC Murders has a more interesting murder setup and solution than this one does, I think. But I like this one just a little bit more than ABC Murders. Yeah, and since it's one that you probably haven't heard too much about, let me go ahead and let you know what I find so interesting about this. There's 3 things about this one that are really quite unique, I think. One of the unique things, of course, is its setting, and you may notice from the cover of the book here. So this one, well, there's the Eye of Horus on the front cover there. This one is set not in England, which most of her novels are set in England, with some of them being set in the Middle East, like Death on the Nile, or Murder in Mesopotamia, or They Come to Baghdad. So some of her settings are in the Middle East, but this one's different from even those ones because this one is set way back in time. So we're going back to the year around 2000 BC, as Agatha Christie lets us know in her introduction. So she's writing a historical detective novel with settings in ancient history, in ancient Egypt. So this is the only time that she does this in her career, where she goes way back into the historical times to set her novel. So it's different just because of its setting is so unique in Christie's canon. Now, you may be asking yourself, does she have the right to do this? Or does she have the knowledge base to do this? And the answer to that is emphatically yes. And so Agatha Christie writes what she knows. And so for those of you guys who know about Christie, you know that she often went down to the Middle East each summer. She wrote a lot of her detective novels while she was in the Middle East. And the reason for that she was so frequently going down there was because, not for vacation really, although in a way it was a little bit of a vacation for just to get away from England. But her second husband, Max Mallowan, was an archaeologist, and so he would go down on his excavations every year, other than the war years, of course, the Second World War. But he would go down to the Middle East, whether it was in Syria or Iraq, and he would excavate, and he would take his wife, Agatha Christie, with him. And so Max and Agatha actually were... this wasn't something that was just a passing interest to them. This was Max's job, and he was pretty well known in the field of archaeology. In fact, the famous discovering of the tomb of Tutankhamun by Howard Carter. Howard Carter was somebody who knew Max Mallowan, and Agatha Christie, through her husband, got to know Howard Carter, the famous person who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb, that had all the bed, the burial chamber was intact. And so Agatha was somebody who, this was a part of her life. And so she writes about what she knows, and she knows this time period pretty well just because of, taking a great interest in what her husband Max was a big part of his life, his career, in fact. So the setting is very unique. It's set in 2000 BC. The setting is Thebes in Egypt. This is a family that is, well, I'll get to that in just a second. Let me talk a little bit more about the other couple of things that make this book unique before I lose my train of thought here. Another thing that makes this book really unique is that the body count is quite high. So, there are 7 people that get murdered along the way in this story. So that makes it unique. And for me, that was an interesting thing as you're trying to solve the murder, figure out who the murderer is as you're reading along. One of the things that's, I guess, helpful is that people are being eliminated. This is not a detective novel where I think Agatha Christie does a great job of leaving you clues, and if you're clever and if you're paying attention, you're picking up on these clues. This is more you're trying to find out the personality or the psychology of who would be most likely to be the murderer. And then, of course, with the bodies dropping off, the people who maybe you thought or were considering them, hey, maybe they're the murderer. When that person dies, obviously you figure, well, that person is not the murderer, so I can scratch them off my list. So, so high body count. Other than, I think, and then there were none. This has the second most people who are murdered in an Agatha Christie novel that I'm aware of. Anyways, you can let me know if I'm wrong by putting a comment down below. And then the third thing that I think that makes this book unique, other than the setting and the high body count, the third thing is that there is no adaptation as of yet. As I'm making this video in 2022, there is no adaptation of this in movie form that I'm aware of. I don't think there is one. And I think I did a little bit of research on this in preparation for this video. I think this is one of only 4 Agatha Christie novels that there is not a movie adaptation of. And interestingly, the ones that don't have a movie adaptation, most of them are standalones. Like this one is a standalone. There's no Poirot, there's no Marple, there's no Tommy and Tuppence. And then the other ones that don't have, if you're interested, that don't have movie adaptations are Destination Unknown, which was one that was written in the 50s, one that I did not particularly enjoy, one of my least favorite Christies. And then Passenger to Frankfurt, which is another standalone, which I think was written in 69 or 70, when Agatha was struggling with, just her health, and maybe her dementia was even setting in at that point. And then the last book that she wrote, which was in 73 or 74, can't remember off the top of my head, didn't look it up, Postern of Fate, which is actually a Tommy and Tuppence, but also there isn't, which is generally considered a pretty weak Christie because obviously it was the last one that she was writing, and a lot of people think that she probably shouldn't have had that one published, but because of her name, who she was, and people were wanting to, have as many Agatha Christie books out as there could possibly be, some of that probably for monetary reasons. That book did get published, even though maybe it should not have, when you look at its readability. Anyways, so those are 3 things that make this one very unique. And like I said, I really like it because it's got that family setting, and you're trying to find out who the cat among the pigeons is, so to speak. So let's go ahead and let's talk about who that family is. So The matriarch, or the patriarch of this family is Imhotep. Imhotep is a priest, and he's what's called a Ka priest. He is responsible for maintaining the tomb of a deceased pharaoh named Meripta, and so his family is. This would mean in ancient Egypt time period. This would be a family who is in the upper class. They're an upper class family because Imhotep is a respected priest. So Imhotep had a wife, and his wife died, and so but they had 4 children. And so these 4 children are some of the main characters in this novel. So we want to talk about who the children are, because they're going to be key players in the story, and possibly maybe murder suspects as well. So we have the oldest son. His name is Amose, and so he is probably in his late 20s, I'd say, and he is married, and his wife is named Satipi. We'll talk a little bit more about Amose and Satipi when I break down the characters a little bit further. And then we have a second son. His name is Sobek. Sobek has a wife, and her name is Kayet. And I hope I'm pronouncing these Egyptian names correctly. If I'm not, please forgive me. The third son is Ipi. Ipi is quite a bit younger than the first 2 sons. So Ipi is about 16 years old in the novel, and he's not married yet. And then there is a daughter, and the daughter is an adult, and so Agatha doesn't say specifically the order in the novel, but Reneseneb is the daughter, and Reneseneb is older. Again, she's in her 20s at least, because she's been married, and her husband actually. Her husband's name was Kay, and he died. They do have a child though. Reneseneb has a daughter named Teddy, who is about 4 years old. So that is Imhotep and his 4 children. Now, so the story starts off. Imhotep has decided that he is going to take a concubine, so not a wife, but a concubine, and he brought her down from Memphis. He went up to Memphis for some priestly duties, and he brought a concubine back home with him. And again, this would not be something that would be uncommon in ancient Egyptian practices for people who are in the upper class, and the priests certainly were in the upper class. So Imhotep brings back a concubine. Her name is Nofret, and she's very beautiful, but she is arrogant, and she is kind of condescending to the people who are in Imhotep's family, so the younger generation. So this creates quite a little conflict within the family, because Nofret kind of comes along, and she is somebody who thinks that she just kind of bursts in on the family, and she's not treating the family very well. So there's a lot of disharmony that's created within the family because of how Nofret has kind of intruded into a family that a lot of people think that, a lot of people wish that she didn't belong there. And Imhotep didn't ask his children about this, of course. He just brought Nofret along. And then to further complicate matters, Imhotep is gone a lot because of his priestly duties. He goes back to Memphis, and Nofret is just left there with the family who don't like her. So we definitely have a recipe for murder, and we can see, there's a lot of tension in the family. Let's talk a little bit more about the family dynamics specifically, though. So we have Yamose, the oldest son. He is kind of weak, and he has kind of a weak character. He's like a pacifist, and he allows himself to be dominated by his wife, who's kind of shrewish, and so her name is Satipi, and so she kind of bosses her husband around. And so Satipi she actually tells Amose several times in the story, I would make a better husband than you would. I would make a better man than you. I'm more of a man than you are. So she's kind of a domineering wife who orders her husband around. The second son, Sobek, who is married to Kayet, they do have children. They're not mentioned that much in the story. They're not given any names, but they are, referred to. Yamose is more of a risk taker, and so he's somebody who, he sees, that as the second son, he's not going to inherit any property from his father, but he could make money in other ways by, being a merchant, or perhaps going into the priesthood himself. So Yamose is more of a risk taker, and so, Sobek, the second son, is more of a risk taker. And his wife, Kayet, she is the kind of woman who's mostly just interested in the rearing of children. And so she doesn't offer too much advice, except on one important occasion in the story. She doesn't offer too much advice. She's viewed by the other members of the family maybe as being a little unintelligent. She's motherly, but she doesn't seem to have taken very much interest in family affairs. So now Reneseneb would like to get remarried because her husband has been dead for 4 years. And so she's beautiful and she's upper class. And so there are definitely some people in the story who are interested in marrying Reneseneb. It would be a good position for them. And so Ippy, the third of the sons, and the youngest of the 4 children, Ippy is kind of arrogant, and he's kind of he knows, a lot for somebody his age. Being 16, having the cockiness and the confidence that comes with youth. He doesn't mind sharing his opinion and telling people what he thinks would be the best course of action. So he does not defer to his elders. He kind of feels like father loves me best of the 4 children, and so therefore I have a right to express my feelings. There's a couple other people we need to introduce in the story. So there's a person who kind of is not really a member of the family, but has always been all around in the family. She's kind of a poor relation. So Imhotep has kind of always watched out for her and counted her amongst the family. So she kind of helps the family. She's really involved in what everybody's doing. She kind of knows everything that's going on within the family, and she kind of likes to boss people around. She's a real busybody, and her name is Hennet. And Hennet, but she's also the kind of person where she's always doing things for other people without them asking. But then her feelings are always offended when they aren't very grateful, or they don't, at least to her, they don't appear that they're very grateful of all the work that she's done for them and all the ways that she's helped them. But of course, she really, really wants the approval of the rest of the family. And so unless the people were just bowing down and saying, "Oh my goodness, I'm so grateful for everything that you've done, Hennet," anything other than that would be, not enough appreciation for Hennet. She's just the person she just has this insatiable desire to be approved of by the family. And so, but she's not getting that approval, and that causes her a lot of resentment. And so she's always like, nobody appreciates me. Nobody loves me for all the work that I've done for the family. Nobody knows, how many hours I've toiled. And so she's always feeling like she's underappreciated. That's her MO. She just acts like she's always being underappreciated. And then the last person in the story that I need to tell you about that is an important character. Imhotep's mother is still alive and lives with the family, and her name is Issa. And Issa she's obviously elderly. She walks with a cane. Her eyesight is almost completely gone, so she's mostly blind. But it's interesting, as the murders start piling up, she becomes very interested in solving the murder. And she becomes very active in trying to investigate, because she has figured out that it's somebody in the family. And so, somebody in the family is a killer, and she wants to know because she wants to protect the family name and protect. She wants to protect the family, as she is the matriarch of the family. So she wants to. So I think that Ace is a really interesting character in the story, and so the first murder is the murder of Nofret, the concubine. I'm going to read you a little bit of dialogue to give you an idea of how the family, what the family thinks of Nofret. Interrupted by whom? By Nofret. Nofret, that woman? Your father should not let his concubine interrupt when he is speaking of business to his eldest son. So this is Yamose and Satipi talking. Yamose is the oldest son, and Satipi is his wife. Women should not concern themselves with business. Possibly Yamose wished that Satipi herself would live up to the maxim she was enunciating so glibly, but he was given no opportunity to speak. His wife swept on. Your father should have made that clear to her at once. My father, said Yamose dryly, showed no signs of displeasure. It is disgraceful, Satipi declared. Your father is completely bewitched by her. He lets her say and do as she pleases. Yamose said thoughtfully, she is very beautiful. Satipi snorted. Oh, she has looks of a kind, but no manners, no upbringing. She does not care how rude she is to all of us. Perhaps you are rude to her. I am the soul of politeness. Kayet and I treat her with every courtesy. Oh, she shall have nothing of which to go complaining to your father. We can wait our time, Kayet and I. Yamose looked up sharply. How do you mean, wait your time? Satipi laughed meaningfully as she moved away. My meaning is woman's meaning. You would not understand. We have our ways and our weapons. Nofret would do well to moderate her insolence. What does a woman's life come to in the end, after all? It is spent in the back of the house amongst the other women. There was a peculiar significance in Satipi's tone. She added, "Your father will not always be here. He will go away again to his estates in the north, and then we shall see." Satipi laughed, a hard-sounding, high laugh, and went back into the house. So we get an idea of the rest of the family's feelings towards Nofret. And of course, Nofret is the first person who's murdered in the story. But as I've already alluded to earlier in the video, she is not the last person murdered in the story. So there are 7 people who are murdered, and they're not all murdered in the same way. So Nofret fell off a high cliff, and that's how she died. There's another person who falls off a high cliff. There is a person who's drowned. There is a person who's strangled. There's a person who is killed by suffocation. There's a person who dies in their beds. So, yeah, there's a lot of bodies stacked up in this one. Again, the characterization and the story, I think, is really, really well done. I really like it a lot. It's one that you probably aren't too familiar with again, but it's really, really good. It's really well written, and I hope that you'll take a chance on it. So if you have any questions, if you've read this story, let me know what you thought of it. If you think that I rated it too high, tell me the reasons why you didn't like it as much as I did. And again, there's a reason this one's not as well known as Agatha Christie's famous books, and so maybe I'm just, maybe I'm out to lunch. Maybe I have no idea what I'm saying. And so tell me below if you think that I am overrating this one. Tell me if you also liked it. It'd be great one day if they made a movie, but so far they haven't. So I hope you guys are having a great day, and I hope you are enjoying these Agatha Christie rankings videos. Leave me some comments below, or if you'd like to see me talk about some different other books, then let me know that too. I will talk to you soon, and we'll see what my next highest Agatha Christie book is.